There's a chef in London who has turned his obsession with beef into an art form. This is Jeremy Chan, and he's using his 2 Michelin-starred restaurant to put not just any beef, but British beef on the map, even claiming that it's the best in the world. But British cuisine has never been globally associated with beef the way that Argentinian asado, Japanese wagyu, and American barbecue have been. Through his one-of-a-kind dishes, Jeremy's setting out to change how we see, taste, and evaluate ingredients in the first place. Because for him, good beef isn't about whether it's the most juicy or tender, it's about the process, from the land a cow grazes on to how the beef is stored, aged, and cooked. I'm visiting his restaurant Ikoyi in London to have a special behind-the-scenes masterclass to find out what makes British beef so special. And of course, afterwards, we're gonna try the full tasting menu to see what makes Ikoyi such a true trailblazer in fine dining and for craftsmen around the world. With 2 Michelin stars and being ranked in the top 50 best restaurants in the world, Ikoyi didn't get to where it is without thinking outside the box. It's a beef restaurant at heart, but it's far from a steakhouse. You'll find incredible British produce melded with West African flavors and even Asian influences. But it's not fusion, it's something else entirely. Whatever your expectations, this place will defy them. So we were up bright and early to meet with Jeremy to find out more about his incredible beef.
So the beef comes from Philip Warren, and Philip Warren, they've been butchers since I think the late 1800s. They've been doing farm-to-table cattle rearing for a very, very long time before many people. They're butchers, but they also are grazers. They have their own cattle, and they work with a few cooperative of farmers in Cornwall and Devon.
Not just anyone can work with artisans this legendary, but Jeremy was so drawn to their uncompromising standards that he decided to make Ikoyi a beef-focused restaurant before he even had all the details figured out. Fast forward to today, and Philip Warren has a whole section of ribs just for Ikoyi.
This is a Hereford rib. It's been reared by a farmer called Brewer. This tells you that it's a Hereford cross, so it's a crossbreed, and this is its kill date, 25th of June. If you touch it and you smell it, you wouldn't imagine that this thing has been aging for 4 months. There's no unwanted flavors, there's no cheesiness. You hear that? It's amazing, eh? This is incredible for stock. So we make a super intense aged beef reduction, and because they're so aged, they're almost already caramelized. The aging is a form of caramelization.
A lot of people assume that working in a less wasteful way is limiting, but with the right technique, it's a creative opportunity. Finding ways to utilize pieces other chefs might ignore actually allows Ikoyi to make more flavorful and unique dishes.
Here, you can see this muscle is attached to this muscle, and here there's a piece of internal fat. If I was less experienced on this at the beginning, I would have just sliced it off here. But this internal fat is incredibly delicious. The internal fat here and the internal fat here, they all have different rendering temperatures and textures. The way that we work here is we always want to give ourselves the option. Maybe it's great, maybe it's going to cook well, so let's keep it on. This is the best beef in the world from my perspective. A lot of people think the best beef means the most tender, the most succulent. For me, it's about the process. It's about how it's made, what the flavor reflects about how it's made.
Every day is a new challenge where he examines the beef and decides what to do with it on the fly based on the time it's been aged and how it's reacted to the aging as well. But Jeremy's like an archaeologist, able to unearth treasure when you think there's none there.
I think that's what's fascinating and that's what's challenging about working here is the lack of consistency. That's like frustrating for chefs. It's like, I want to order 5 kilos of Wagyu and I can slice it, I can portion it, it's done. With this, sometimes it's chewy, sometimes it's extremely tender. So every single time we have to do something different. We have to taste it, we have to carve it differently, we have to cook it differently. Or sometimes we have a piece of beef that's so lean, there's almost no fat on it. It's lean because this animal's had a different way of life. Does it make it any less good? Because they have less fat, there's more umami. And because they're aged for such a long time, they almost have a mushroomy, pastrami taste to them. Marbling and fat content isn't everything. There's so many applications to use a natural product.
But these subtle differences can be kind of jarring to customers who are more used to mainstream typical beef that's just purely buttery, sweet, and super tender. Celebrating subtlety is one thing. Communicating subtlety is the hard part. Speaking of, if you want to see more videos like this where I go behind the scenes and show the effort and artistry that chefs have in creating the best restaurants around the world, then definitely subscribe below. When we hit 1 million subscribers, I'm gonna be taking one of you to one of the best restaurants around the world, all expenses paid, so make sure you subscribe.
You have to educate the guests though. The first time they have this, after they've had Wagyu, they're like, why is it so chewy? The chew brings out flavor, more umami is coming out. This part of the ribeye, for me, is the best because it has some of the most delicious fat on it. This fat here, this internal fat, is absolutely incredible and it stays beautifully attached to the rib. So I think about like what is edible and like what is work for the guest. And sometimes we leave a little bit of work to do for the guest. If something is attached so beautifully, let's give them a bit of gristle. They're gonna witness the beef in such a beautiful way. And so every table gets different shapes, different sizes, different cooking temperatures.
While Jeremy has made beef one of the focuses of Ikoyi, that's just one way to look at it. The menu evolves dramatically every few weeks, and Jeremy doesn't like labels or rules, but this willingness to take risks is Ikoyi's biggest strength. After leaving a career in finance, Jeremy started cooking when he was 26 and spent only a short time at a few legendary restaurants before founding Ikoyi. While their food draws upon West African influences and Jeremy's multicultural identity as a Chinese Canadian, there's no way to put Ikoyi in a box, and the dinner itself is a whirlwind of punchy, in-your-face flavors that make it one of the most unique dining experiences in the world. There's something subversive about serving food that isn't trying to recreate one particular cuisine, but with a menu that incorporates so many diverse influences and bold and punchy flavors, the question is it really a cohesive meal? Right off the bat, Ikoyi takes you on an adventure through spice. The food is comforting and hearty, but there's always a surprising kick. From Gola peppercorn oil in this caramelized chicken wing broth, to wasabi creme fraiche on this sea bass. The surgical precision that Jeremy and his team apply to the beef applies to the flavor profiles here as well. Even with single bites, you get an explosion of flavor, but there's harmony within each dish, like with this 5 months aged sirloin we saw earlier, which Jeremy turned into a beef tartlet.
A honey mustard emulsion. The oil has been infused with smoked shallots and chilies with some fermented pickled garlic, some finger lime from the Pyrenees. It's lightly seasoned.
So we're starting off strong with a little beef tartlet with bluefin tuna. This is a great combo. Can't go wrong with it. It's fatty and rich, but perfect balance. Just enough for one bite. Beautiful. Whew. Ikoyi's menu is a parade of the best, most carefully sourced British ingredients. From trout to bluefin tuna to squid, the seafood they serve here has been handled with as much care and thoroughness as the beef.
So for our next snack, we have our fermented rice pancake. We have some fresh truffle on top and a fried squid with some chili oil.
This is the thing about fish, is like there's so much amazing wild fish in the UK. I'd argue that it's some of the best on the planet. People that we work with, they really take care with what they've caught and how it gets to us. They really see that fish quality is not only in the catch, it's what happens from catch to the restaurant. Yeah. That's the crucial part.
In my opinion, the magic of Ikoyi is in their dry aging techniques, which they apply not just to beef or lamb, but also to things like fish. With special custom equipment and an incredible team that is extremely talented and knowledgeable about dry aging, they ensure that everything is dry aged to perfection. Turbot normally has a delicate and sweet flavor, but the dry-aged turbot here, which we actually saw on the way in, has almost a richness and a nuttiness to it as well. So we've got one of their signature dishes now. This beautiful caviar, a beautifully dark beetroot reduction, saffron oil, razor clams, really, really interesting combination of flavors. That is an unreal bite of food. I don't know if I've ever had anything quite like that. It's really powerful and umami. Softness, almost a sweetness comes from that custard. That is incredible. Holy crap, I'm blown away. I can't stop eating it. I can't stop eating it. The star of the next dish is the rib from earlier that's aged for 4 months and coated in a butter that's infused with Nigerian suya spices, which is like a barbecue spice mix. So even though the slices are wafer thin, each is already rich and aromatic. The secret weapon though is the beef fat, an ingredient that's often overshadowed by vegetable oils but is the secret to creating layers of umami.
This is a 5-month aged sirloin of Angus. I just keep pounding it, and this helps to tenderize the meat and also fuse it together. We can use small pieces, big pieces, bash them together, so it's an efficient use.
When you think of a beef-focused restaurant, you might think of clean garnishes, maybe just salt, but Ikoyi is legendary for their sauces, which seem to contain hundreds of flavors.
This is our homemade buffalo sauce. This is made with beef gelatin, honey, pickled vegetables, homemade soy, beef reduction, and a fermented hot sauce. So this toast is made with beef fat, and the dough itself is based on a brioche, but we use beef fat and sage in the dough, and it's steamed.
The beef is so tender. There's another underlying spice which kind of feels persistent across dishes, which I personally love. I feel like sometimes fine dining can be a bit too subtle, a bit too delicate, but I like that these flavors have a little bit of a punch to them. And that beef, I mean, it's just so tender, it almost melts in your mouth, it's that good. We've had some good beef preparations already, and I can see why Jeremy loves his British beef. That's awesome. Next up, a dish that hasn't left the Ikoyi menu since the beginning, and for good reason.
We have our smoked rice with lobster custard and Scottish Tyrol mushrooms.
I already know their smoked rice is incredible. It still is probably one of my top 10 favorite bites of all time I've ever had at a restaurant, so we get to reminisce and be nostalgic a little bit. Spicy, creamy, crispy, earthy, every single flavor that you could ask for. To this day, that is a top 10 bite of food ever. Literally, if you come to Ikoyi for this single dish, it will be worth it because that is how good this rice is. The final beef dish of the night ended up being one of my favorites because you can truly see the quality of the beef on display in this dish.
Beef we work with down in Cornwall is very special to us. It's 2 years old, it's purely grass-fed, and it's just left to roam around sort of free pasture. This cut is from the deckle muscle, very soft, fatty cut.
It's a beautiful muscle here with the fat cap attached. Where else do you see like a steak like that? It's quite unique, right? So this is the muscle that we love to cook with. It just melts in the mouth. This beautiful fat is what's been rendered. And we actually poach it for about 3 hours, and it creates this incredible texture.
So a good deckle muscle is perfectly marbled and tender, a steak lover's dream and a chef's secret. In fact, there's actually a Reddit thread of people who are just like obsessing over this specific cut. But you won't actually find it in most grocery stores or steakhouses because most butchers opt to remove it from the ribeye to have a more uniform piece of meat.
So we want the sugars in the tamari to caramelize. This is what I really love, these like caramelized fat in here. Amazing, right? If you look at the way we plate these sauces, there's a flat line here and a beautiful perfect curve on this side. It's important to us because the saucing kind of demonstrates the care with which the kitchen is plating your dish. This is our onion caramel, which is a sauce made with caramelized onion juices that have been reduced to a glaze and infused with rosemary. Even though this is quite like wild flavors on this dish, you still have elements of classic beef condiments.
Our last serving of beautiful British beef. We've had a few different servings of beef today, but that one is just a beautifully cooked classic preparation. Peppery, a little bit spicy as well, which I love. And geez, I mean, that is like as good as super famous Japanese Wagyu beef, but it's all done here in the UK. I can see why they love it so much. And it wouldn't be Ikoyi without a beef dessert. One last beef dish in the dessert. We have a beef fat caramel with this miso cookie. Rich but fruity, umami but sweet. I mean, that's a perfect balance. You know I love cookies. This is a delicious cookie. Ooh. Ikoyi is brutal precision, careful craftsmanship, and uncompromising standards, all in service of pure deliciousness. The dishes might look elegantly simple, but they pack hundreds of flavors and multiple levels of spice. And the unsung hero of the menu is truly the beef.
We have really, really old farmland. We have really old soil. People that are using it in a really unique way are producing very, very delicious type of meat.
In fine dining, sometimes the most transformative experiences don't involve turning food into forms you can't recognize. A true master can fundamentally change the way you see and taste a single ingredient.
Rearing cattle and eating meat, farming, it's not actually like natural. It's still a human process, but what they're doing is as close to natural as possible. And I think that's where you get flavor, that's where you get complexity and interesting taste.
And for every person who's ordering a well-done steak, there are many more people who walk away from Ikoyi with a completely transformed view of these underrated ingredients and a new appreciation for British beef. Here's to many more.